He was used to silence. The kind of silence that weighs on your chest, clogs your throat, and echoes louder than any shout. For Marcus, a struggling single dad barely holding his life together, silence was both enemy and refuge. His small apartment perched on the edge of a sleepy town, shadows stretching across peeling wallpaper and cracked window panes like scars. The hum of the old radiator was the only warmth, not just in the room, but in his heart. Before we dive into the story, if you believe in second chances, quiet miracles, and the healing power of unexpected connections, hit that subscribe button and join us. These stories stay with you long after the last word. Now, let's begin. The morning was cold, the sky a dull gray canvas smeared with restless clouds. The wind whispered through cracked door frames, carrying the faint scent of rain and dust. Outside, a broken swing creaked in an empty playground, the rusty chains marking time with a haunting rhythm. Marcus pulled his threadbare jacket tighter, staring at his reflection in the chipped kitchen mirror. He looked tired, the kind of tired that doesn't wash away with sleep. A soft knock startled the quiet. He wasn't expecting company. The city bus that stopped outside his block was always empty this early. But today, 6 quiet girls stood there, shivering beneath oversized coats, their eyes cast downward. They were out of place, fragile like porcelain dolls lost in a world too loud. Marcus hesitated before opening the door. The youngest clutched a worn teddy bear with missing eyes. Another held a cracked music box, its melody faint and broken. They said nothing, but their presence carried a silent plea that sliced through his numbness. This wasn't a coincidence. The girls followed him inside, their footsteps soft against the worn hardwood. Each carried invisible weight, secrets wrapped in silence, stories they couldn't speak aloud. Marcus offered them what little warmth he could: blankets, a pot of weak tea, and a battered old radio that crackled songs from a forgotten era. He didn't know it yet, but they were sent to test his heart, to unravel the layers he'd built around grief, guilt, and survival. The days that followed moved like slow-motion film. The apartment, once a sanctuary of solitude, filled with whispers, giggles, and the occasional sigh. Marcus watched as the girls settled into routines, brushing hair in quiet morning rituals, sharing scraps of stories through hesitant smiles, and painting walls with colors borrowed from forgotten dreams. There was Lila, the oldest, whose eyes held a storm barely contained; Mia, whose laughter was a fragile thing that flickered like candlelight; and Zoe, the smallest, who never spoke but traced patterns in the dust with careful fingers. Marcus found himself repairing more than broken shelves and leaky faucets. He repaired himself. Late one night, beneath the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through thin curtains, Marcus traced the worn edges of a photograph the girls had found tucked behind the sofa. It was a picture of family, smiling, whole, and impossible to reach. Their faces blurred with time, but one detail stood out: a faded tattoo on a wrist, the same as one worn by one of the girls. A twist he hadn't seen coming. Winter deepened, and so did their bond. The girls taught Marcus the language of hope, quiet lessons in resilience that no textbook could capture. He taught them how to cook with what little he had, how to patch torn clothes with stubborn stitches, and how to find laughter beneath tears. But as spring threatened to break through the frozen earth, the shadows lurking just beyond the door began to stir. Letters slipped under the cracked door, and signed, accusing, threatening. Whispers followed them through the streets, questions they couldn't answer, and a truth too heavy to carry. Who were these girls really? And why had they been left at his doorstep? The answers waited in the silence, and Marcus knew the test of his heart was far from over. He stood there, the envelope heavy in his hand, the crimson wax like a drop of blood on worn paper. Outside, the wind whispered to the bare trees, carrying the chill of an approaching storm. The girls clustered behind him, their eyes wide, unblinking in the low light, waiting for him to decide what came next. The words inside that letter had no signature, no promise, only a warning. They're not just children. They're a reckoning. What reckoning could this fragile group of 6 quiet girls bring? Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of the unknown pressing down like winter snow. He closed the door slowly, locking it against the darkness beyond. The apartment, small and cluttered, felt suddenly too tight, the walls pressing inward with secrets and silence. For days, the letter haunted him. He studied the girls, searching for answers in their soft glances, the way they avoided his eyes when the shadows passed too close. But they gave nothing away, not a word about who sent them or why. Instead, the girls created a quiet world within these walls. Mornings were filled with ritual, brushing hair, sharing bread, tending to a fragile garden of hope in cracked pots on the windowsill. Each flower that bloomed was a fragile defiance against the past. Marcus watched as Lila sketched late at night by candlelight, her pencil tracing delicate lines that told stories she couldn't speak. Mia sang softly while washing dishes, the melody a balm for broken hearts. Zoe remained silent but moved like a shadow, weaving through the small space with the grace of someone who'd learned to vanish. And then there was the oldest, Lila, whose eyes burned with storm Marcus could not quell. One evening, as he sat repairing the radio that never quite caught a clear signal, she slipped him a folded paper, a map marked with names and places that twisted his gut, a path to answers or to danger. Marcus knew then that the girls were not simply lost children, but threads in a tapestry far bigger than he understood. They were running from something, and someone was chasing shadows he hadn't seen. Late nights became restless. He paced the narrow hallway, running his hands over chipped paint and worn photographs, trying to stitch together the story that had been thrust upon him. The walls whispered with echoes of laughter and fear, promises and broken dreams. He found himself drawn to the old music box, cracked, silent, that Mia carried like a talisman. When he finally coaxed it open, the fragile melody spilled out, haunting and sweet like a lullaby from a distant memory. It was a soundtrack of survival, but survival came with a cost. The envelope's message echoed louder with each passing day. Marcus could feel eyes on the apartment, neighbors looking away, streets growing colder. The letters kept coming, more urgent, more veiled threats, warning him to let go, to forget. He refused. One rainy afternoon, when the world outside blurred in a watercolor gray, a knock at the door shattered the fragile calm. Marcus opened it to find a woman, mid-30s, sharp eyes, official badge hanging from a worn lanyard. Her name was Agent Harper, and she carried the weight of questions and judgment. She spoke with careful words, hinting at investigations, missing children, and dangerous networks. Marcus knew then the reckoning wasn't just words on paper. It was coming through the door, but he would not turn away. Not now, not after the laughter had returned. The girls hid in corners and shadows, their silence more defiant than ever. Marcus stood tall, voice steady as he told Agent Harper they were safe, loved, protected. He showed the papers he'd been fighting to file, guardianship forms scribbled with hope and desperation. Her eyes searched his, weighing truth and fear. After long moments, she relented, for now, but the warning hung in the air. This was only the beginning. That night, Marcus sat with the girls around a flickering candle. Lila spoke for the first time in weeks, her voice barely more than a whisper. She told him of places where children disappeared, where hope was a currency traded in silence, where families were fractured by secrets deeper than fear. Her story was a thread pulling Marcus into a world he had never seen, a world that threatened to swallow them all. Days blurred into weeks. Marcus balanced work, paperwork, and the fragile threads of their new family. He built makeshift routines, teaching the girls how to laugh again, how to trust a broken world. They turned the apartment into a sanctuary, walls adorned with drawings, tiny hands planting seeds that promised spring. But the reckoning waited. One cold morning, the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected. Marcus opened to find a man, weathered, intense, claiming to be searching for one of the girls. His words were polite, but edged with menace. Marcus's heart hammered as questions fell between them like broken glass. Who was this man? What truth had they brought through the door? The girls clung together, their silence louder than any scream. That night, Marcus lay awake, the shadows crawling along the ceiling like restless ghosts. He reached for the music box, winding it slowly until a cracked melody filled the room, a fragile promise against the dark. He knew then the test was far from over, and the reckoning was not just theirs to face, but his. The storm had passed, but the air still carried a heavy scent of rain, and something else, unease. Marcus stood at the cracked window of his small apartment, watching the city breathe beneath a pale morning sun. The girls sat quietly at the kitchen table, their eyes tracing the patterns of light and shadow, waiting for the moment that none of them knew how to face. Outside, the world spun on, indifferent, relentless. The man who had come to the door days ago lingered in Marcus's thoughts, a shadow tethered to the fragile peace they'd built. His polite menace was a reminder. The reckoning wasn't done. The past was still reaching for them, pulling at loose threads. But Marcus had learned something in the quiet hours, the whispered prayers, the laughter that cracked through the silence. Family isn't just blood. It's the choice to stay, to fight, to believe. He looked at each girl, the way they held themselves like broken birds who'd somehow learned to fly again. Mia's soft humming, Lila's fierce gaze, Zoe's graceful silence. Each a story written in scars and hope. They were not just children left behind. They were a test, a challenge to a world too quick to look away. He knelt beside the smallest, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "We're going to be okay," he said softly, but even he wasn't sure. Not yet. That afternoon, the knock came again, sharper this time, harder to ignore. Marcus opened the door to find not one, but two figures standing in the gray light. The official woman with the badge, Agent Harper, and behind her, a tall man whose eyes carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid truths. They stepped inside without invitation, their presence cutting to the fragile calm like a blade. "We need to talk," Harper said, voice low but firm. Marcus nodded, heart pounding, knowing that this was a moment the girls feared and the past demanded. They gathered in the small living room, the air thick with tension. Harper laid out papers, legal threats, investigations, warnings of custody battles, questions about the girls' origins that Marcus could barely answer. The man behind her watched silently, his gaze flickering to each child as if searching for a secret only they held. Lila met his eyes with a defiant flash. Marcus saw the courage in her stance and felt a spark. A fire he hadn't known was still inside him. When Harper asked about the letters, the threats, the shadows trailing them, Marcus stood taller. "I don't know everything," he admitted, "but I do know they're safe here. They belong here." The room held its breath. The man spoke then, voice rough with years of burden. "You don't understand who you're protecting. These girls are not just lost children. They're pieces of a broken world, victims of trafficking, of lies, of darkness that runs deeper than you can imagine." Marcus swallowed hard, the truth crashing over him like cold waves. But he refused to back down. "Then help me protect them. Don't tear this family apart." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Harper softened. "We'll investigate. But until then, no one moves. No one leaves without oversight." The girls huddled close, fear flickering behind their eyes. But Marcus wrapped an arm around Lila, whispering strength into the quiet. That night, Marcus lit the music box. The cracked melody filled the room, a fragile shield against the storm outside and the storm to come. He thought of the letter, the warning, and knew that the reckoning was still ahead. But this time he was ready. The days that followed were a test of will and heart. Social workers came and went. Questions were asked, documents gathered. The girls endured interviews in cold rooms. But through it all, they found small moments of light. A shared smile, a whispered song, a hand held tight. Marcus rebuilt the apartment into a sanctuary. Walls were painted in soft colors, the kitchen filled with fresh bread and laughter. He taught the girls how to trust again, how to dream. Together, they planted a tiny garden on the balcony, a symbol of life pushing through the cracks. And slowly, the community began to see. Neighbors who once looked away now nodded hello. A local teacher offered tutoring. A nearby church brought meals. The world wasn't perfect, but was opening, one small act of kindness at a time.